Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Tonight, the main purpose of our meeting is an information session on the 40B being proposed for land off Highland. But first, I'd like to introduce members Mariano Golbuff, Lance Grensbach, Richard Howard, our town manager, Mike Betancourt, Selectmen, our vice chairman, and I'm Jim Whitehead, the chairman of the board. We're going to start, our next regular meeting will be July 10th, Monday, July 17th, and July 24th, and you're all welcome to come there as well. With that, I'm going to jump ahead to the consent agenda to get that out of the way so that we don't all run out of here at the end of the day without having done that, because there's a couple people who'd like to hold some parties and have a little liquor with it. So, Mike, if you'd proceed.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I'd move that we approve one-day alcoholic beverage licenses for Mike Waddell for the Griffin Museum on July 13th, 2017, the Griffin Museum, and Archie McIntyre for Right Lock Conservancy July 6th, 9th, 13th, 20th, 22nd, 23rd, 27th at the 1827 barn at Right Lock Farm.
Second.
All in favor?
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve a license for estate sale to Joanna Dowling at 94 High Street, July 21st through July 23rd, 2017, and the location is 94 High Street.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. And with that, we'll proceed to with what I'm going to start with a brief presentation. I hope no more than about 15 minutes. Then we'll open the floor for comments, any comments that you might have about the proposal. We have until August 11th to respond to Mass Housing with a letter of comments relative to this proposal. And part of tonight's session is to get your input so that we can add that input into the proposal, or the letter back to Mass Housing. And we'll get into the entire process in just a moment. I might start off by saying you might wonder, it's an unusual picture. But to me, this is a sea eagle off the coast of Norway about to strike a fish, which you can see just a little bit of white over there to the side. It's kind of my metaphor for the developers who are swooping in on Winchester with 40B proposals, because it's just an attractive place for them to make some money. And by coming in with 40B proposals, they can override our local zoning. So this is just sort of my metaphor for what is going on here. The project site is near 22 Highland. It's a wooded area right behind Dana Avenue. It's 1.44 acres. It's the site in yellow. It abuts 5.34 acres of town land. That's the land surrounded by red. It abuts the fells to the north and abuts residential property on Dana Avenue, and is just down the street from Winchester Hospital, although I suspect everyone here knows that. This is a view of the site looking in from Highland Avenue. This was taken just 2 days ago, when we did our day before yesterday, when we did our site walk with Mass Housing. And this is a view of the site looking in from North Border Road. You can just see to the right of the post at the far left is a little orange stake. That is one end of the property line, and you can see the pile of logs over on the other side, on the right side, and that is pretty much the other end of the property at that end. So it is a fairly narrow little strip. Little history. The developer initially proposed 3 single-family homes for this site. And he went to the ZBA and he asked for a series of variances so that he could develop this particular project. As you can see, three houses with a cul-de-sac. The ZBA advised the proponent that it was unlikely to grant the 8 variances that he required in order to do this proposal, and he withdrew it. He then came back to the planning board and petitioned for a subdivision approval. That proposal included a road connecting Highland to the DCR-owned North Border Road. DCR, however, did not approve connecting to the North Border Road in a timely fashion, and so the planning board denied the petition for lack of approval of that connection, and the reason was to have 2 accesses for public safety into this area. The site is currently woodland, and I think anybody who lives on Dana Avenue knows that it's a fairly steep slope to get up to North Border Road. The portion of the site's within 100 feet of the wetlands, and the wetland, you see the blue line that comes down, that is an overflow from the North Reservoir, and it flows down into a culvert, and the reason it abruptly ends is because it enters a culvert at that point. Now, those of you who live in the area will remember that in the past that culvert has plugged at times of overflow, and we've had significant water flowing across Highland Avenue and across the site, as well as 22 Highland, which has caused that building to become derelict. The current 40B proposal is 24 units in 3-story buildings. Well, 2.5 officially, but they really have 3 livable stories. There are 6 affordable housing units because the 40B requires 25% of the housing be affordable. They are for sale units. They aren't rental units. Now, if they were rental units, we would be able to count all 24 units as part of our affordable housing, but since they are going to be sold as condos, we only get 6. There are 48 parking spaces on the ground floor. Actually, I want to correct that number because that number should be 46. The application says 48, but when you look at the drawings, which we'll see later, there are only 46 parking spaces. There's access, the main access would be from Highland Avenue with the minimum distance to the rear of a property down at the lower end, to the left end of that drawing. The minimum distance to a property on Dana would be 15.8 feet, which is within the, if you build a single family house there, that's the distance you would have to be back, 15 feet. So the other, you can see a small turnaround up at the right end there, up by North Border Road, and it does have a fire gate onto North Border Road. That will, again, require approval from DCR in order to put that fire gate in. This is a very complex slide, but basically you come across the total. You've got 24 units, 114 bedrooms, and I count 46 parking spaces for all the buildings, even though the application says there's 2 parking spaces for every unit. I find it in the building 4, and you'll see that there's only 2 spaces for 2 of the units. I mean, 1 space for each of 2 units. But you can see they're reasonable, they're 1,000 square feet to 1,800 square feet in that range, and you can see, we'll see the layouts. They're fairly compact units. This is a rendering of building 4. You can see they all have access from the outside via steps. And there's parking underneath for the cars. So all these buildings are pretty much taking advantage of the slope of the land to provide parking on the first floor, along with storage units, and then some units on the first floor. They're independent units on the first floor. The second floor and third floor are units that have 4 bedrooms. There's usually 2 bedrooms on the first floor, 4 bedrooms on the second and third. So, frequently asked questions. Isn't this zoned for single family? Yes, it is. Doesn't that preclude the construction of apartments? No, it doesn't. Not when you have a 40B. The parcel's currently zoned RBD 10, and the town-owned land adjacent to the parcel is zoned as SCI. You know, if the 40B projects permit the developer to override local zoning as long as we don't have, unless we have 10% affordable housing units. We currently have approximately 2%. That's why the Sea Eagle's swooping in. How many units must be affordable to qualify for 40B status? 25% of the units. How is an affordable unit defined? Well, project sponsors are required to provide affordability for households with incomes between 70 and 80% of the listed metropolitan statistical area median income. What does that mean? It's about $78,000 is the income. We're not talking really low income here. We're talking probably the salary of a DPW worker or a landscaper or somebody who works in this town. What is what's the approval process? Well, on May 22nd, we received notice that these people had filed an application for project eligibility. What that means is they have filed to Mass Housing for what's known as a letter of eligibility, and that basically gets the process started. So the town was notified, the comment period begins, and that's where we are right now. We have asked for an extension because otherwise we would be having to deliver our comments next week. So we needed time to get our act together, and it's also vacation season, so we asked for an extension to the 11th of August, and we will probably get it. The town submits its comments to the Mass Housing, and then Mass Housing makes a determination whether to issue the project eligibility letter or not. That'll be the next step. Once that letter is issued, then the project sponsor will go to the ZBA. The selectmen at that point have nothing to do with this project. It all depends on what happens at the ZBA. The ZBA can, at that point, they will issue a comprehensive permit at the end of their result. They can either deny the project, and they better have some really good reasons, like public safety, to deny it. Otherwise, Mass Housing will just ignore the denial and let the project move forward. But they can put reasonable conditions, such as, sidewalks or additional sidewalks or something to mitigate a situation, provided it doesn't impact project financial viability. And Mass Housing will make that determination, because there are guidelines that Mass Housing uses for what a developer can earn as a profit on a project like this. Again, this is totally out of our control. It all happens at the state level. Then once the comprehensive permit's issued, Mass Housing will again review that permit and decide, have we imposed unreasonable conditions or conditions that impact the project viability? If so, they will issue a modified permit. Then there will be a project appeal. You all probably are aware of the project that's on over on Cambridge Street. It's now currently in the land court. It's being appealed by the people at the Ledges, who feel the project is too large, and it's in the court. Whether they prevail, I suspect they will not. But that's up for the court to determine. So the project, abutters may appeal, but you do so at your expense. Then the court makes a decision and a building permit issues and construction begins. Once construction's complete, then we hold a lottery for the affordable units. And so people apply for that, we draw lots and decide which of those applicants is eligible to move into the affordable units. We just completed that process at Dick Street on the apartments, the condos at Dick Street, where one of the units was affordable, and we had 27 applicants for one spot. So it's obvious that there's demand for these units. And then once that happens, an occupancy permit is issued and the people move in. So the project, we already know that Highland Avenue has a traffic problem. We've been working on that for a number of years. We know it, but will this project make a bad situation worse? Maybe. Is that enough reason for the ZBA to deny a comprehensive permit? No, because it's an existing condition. On Cambridge Street, if you recall, to get onto Wainwright Road, you have to go north past Whole Foods up to the turnaround in front of the gas station to go southbound to get onto Wainwright Road. They added 95 units. Did they require any, did mass housing require any changes to that? No. Number of bedrooms means large families will purchase the units. Can't we deny it for overcrowding to the schools? Again, no. However, the school committee has been working on a master plan and projecting enrollment for the future. And we had a meeting with the school committee. We looked at all possible sites for 40B developments in this town and their potential to generate students. And those projects have been factored into their master plan, which we already know is going to, with Cambridge Street, for example, will certainly go ahead and impact probably Ambrose. If we have other projects like Forest Ridge or Holton Street or our proposed project down on Waterfield Block will all impact different school districts. But we cannot, ZBA cannot deny the project to avoid overcrowding in the schools. Again, that's considered an existing condition. However, there is a process called 40R. And 40R is a process that we are investigating as part of our housing production plan. And that does give us the ability to get some money back from the state for what's known as a friendly 40B. So we can get some money back from the state to compensate us for the additional students in the schools. And then finally, there have been several 40B projects proposed for my area of town. Why is the town permitting all these projects to impact my side of town? The answer is we have no control. These projects are happening on private land as private negotiations between landowners and developers. And we can't, it's basically a private transaction over which we can only, as we did on Forest Ridge, object to the project on the basis of public safety, access, and other things that we can find, such as the site is just not compatible or is impacting our watershed, our drinking water watershed, for example. Now, oops. This is building 1. It's the lowest building closest to Highland. It's 4 units. 2 units on the first floor to look just like the units on the second floor, except that there's no third floor. So there are 2-bedroom units on the first floor. They're about 1,100 square feet. And then on the third floor, which is really a half floor, and you can see here in the corners, if you remember the rendering, there was a dormer This is where the dormer comes down, so it limits the amount of space that's up there, but it does provide for 2 additional bedrooms. So these are 4, basically what we have are 2 and 4 bedroom units. This is the first floor of the garage and basement of building 2. Again, there are now 4 units in this building as well. Sorry, 6 units in this building. And so you've got parking for all 6 units on the first floor as well as storage units. And this is typical for all of the buildings. It's what the garage and basement looks like. This building is a triplex. And again, it has 3 units on the first floor, pretty much the same. Again, about 1,100, these are about 1,200 square feet. The second floor is just the mirror image of the first floor. And then you have the third floor, again, with another bath and 2 more bedrooms. Building 3, this is a larger building. It has 8 units, or 6 units here. Again, it's a slightly different arrangement with instead of a 3 side by side, there's 1 to the back, because you're now further away from Dana. Same thing on the second floor and the third floor. Building 3, parking. Okay. Building 4 is the largest building. It is 8 units. And on the first floor, again, you've got the parking below. You've got the bedrooms, they're all pretty much laid out the same. Second floor, and again, the bedrooms up on the third floor. So with that, kind of explains what the project is all about. So I can now open the floor to anybody who'd like to comment. Yes, sir.
I live on North Water Road, Mike and Howie.
They'll come up and give their names.
Do you know if he has any type of curb cut permit existing now for North Water Road at all?
He does, actually. He has for a curb cut for a single-family home.
Not for that fire gate?
Not for the fire gate, correct.
We've wasted a lot of time, money, effort, town resources on previous plans.
We have.
Is there any way we could just stop this right now because there's no permit for this?
Well, we will, obviously, that's one of the issues that we will raise in our comment letter to Mass Housing, and we hope that that will be taken into consideration. But it's up to Mass Housing to decide whether or not...
So before it goes any further, is there any way we can force him to say, provide us with this permit, or have Mass Housing come to him and say, we need that permit?
Well, that would be the purpose of, our comment in the letter would be to point out that he doesn't have a permit and that he can't proceed with this project until he does. There's another issue with North Border Road, which, as you know, since you live on it, is not 20 feet wide, which is a required width for a fire lane. So, again, that will be pointed out in our letter, our comment letter to the Mass Housing.
And that would be a very tight turn with that.
It would be a very tight turn.
For any type of fire vehicle,
Right.
or school, or whatever.
So is your the house on the corner of Dana and...
My logs, yeah.
Oh, well, I admired your landscaping yesterday, so I commend you for your landscaping. Yes, sir.
With the DCR, I had a lot of contact when we were trying to stop him from getting the road. He initially had told the planning board that he had, approval. When he initially got the approval for the driveway, it was for 1 house. He told the board that it was for the 3. We actually said 3. It started with 3, but then he comes back with the next plan was 4.
Right.
We just sort of switched. With DCR, we have this in writing. He applied for 1 house, and then he went to the town and said he had approval for a driveway for 4 houses. So he lied to the DCR. But the DCR also has very strict rules. I found they did a whole study of every road that they own, and there's strict rules about making curb cuts. So you mentioned about it's up to the state, but the DCR is separate division. They could basically say no curb cut for a fire road, didn't they? If they
Oh, yes, they could.
They have the approval to stop this, I would think. DCR will not stop it, but at least say we're not allowing fire an access way.
They certainly can do that.
The other comment I have is like, just with a lot of the history, the planning board, the developer initially came in with you mentioned that he needed to put a road through and it was blocked. The reason was because cul-de-sacs aren't allowed. He would need a waiver. So initially he went to get the road approved. And the way he did it was he showed a windy road that he said wouldn't need any waivers so that he could do it. And then he quickly said, but I'd rather put a straight road in, I'll need a couple waivers. And the planning board gave them the waivers. What they never did, and I've talked to Brian about this, they never went and looked at his plan. I mean, other than 5 minutes of being up there, and did any measurements to make sure that the windy road really could be built. I hate to say it, but I think people know this guy. He makes some errors, even though he's an engineer, with his measurements. All the neighbors paid a surveyor. And the surveyor did a survey independently of what the developer, he is a surveyor. And his plan that he showed the town was gonna violate a bunch of the setbacks. So I just think before the state approves things, I'm hoping the town resources will go out and do some measurements, or they force him, because he's not above making mistakes on his plans, like the 46 versus 48. That might be a mistake. It may not be. I've yet to see him make a mistake that is against it. They always seem to go in his favor. Just saying. Test pits, for instance, he was supposed to drill test pits. Couldn't get equipment in there. It's too steep. But don't worry, I'm confident the water table is going to be fine for this building. My friends, the developer, said they can get test pits in anywhere.
Well, the current drawing shows test pits.
They weren't currently done. They didn't go deep enough. He said he couldn't get big enough equipment in there, and he wanted to wait till the land was clear, and then he'd do them. Sort of putting this apple before the horse in front of the cart. I mean, I'm just saying. I'm hoping the town watches this. I'm not saying we stop it. I know you can't, but he's not above, getting approvals and then saying, "Oh, my plans. Sorry, I mismeasured. The things aren't right." I mean, and then it's just sort of like, "Well, you've already demoed the land and started building." And just one last thing, Brian mentioned: is there any way if he's applying for 24? He told us in a meeting. We have this probably in writing. He said he's banking on getting like 10 or 12 approved. He doesn't think he'll get the full 24 because he's going for the max, hoping will they come back and say 24 don't really fit here because of runoff, because of parking? And will they ever come back and say we'll approve 12 units?
He is required to submit a pro forma with the application. We have not seen that pro forma. We didn't get a copy of it in the book that we received. Again, that's something that we would ask for, but he's required to submit a pro forma that shows the economic viability of 24 units. I suspect he needs 24 to be economically viable. I don't know, Dave, you're nodding your head, yes, no?
I would respectfully say that even with the 40B, there should be and could be negotiations on density. If you look at,
Oh, yeah.
Even like when, Mill Creek, who we're talking to, and when I researched in Needham, a much bigger scale, but, they went for 300 units, they ended up getting 113, so, somewhere along the line, there's certainly dialogue,
Yeah.
with the state, and I think there's enough meat on the bone with this site, just the way we fought Forest Ridge, applied some resources, and, I certainly think the neighbors are deserving of our best shot to try to mitigate it as best we can. I think we're all on board in doing that, and I think
Right.
this site certainly has hair on it enough to try to do what's best for the neighborhood and the town.
Ann?
I have only 8 points tonight, which means that I'm really, really prepared. At Forest Ridge, there were thousands of errors. This is a better prepared document. There are less errors in this document than there were for Forest Ridge. That much said, there still are a number of misinformation, so let me just go through them quickly. One is in conservation, the application repeatedly claims that there's no wetlands on the site. That's technically correct, but as you know, there are wetlands resources on the site. And I specifically don't like the one sentence in the very opening that describes the project that says, "We've met with local conservation, finding no wetlands impacts." Well, of course, they've never met with conservation about this specific project. And moreover, when they did present their definitive plan to conservation, there wasn't ever any opine. Conservation never opined on that decision. And in fact, there were problems with the stormwater design, problems that were big enough that they were cited as part of the reason why the planning board denied the application. So this isn't true. And I'd like I'm hoping that the selectmen can say, look, there was no opinion on this matter. The next is ADA compliance. The project is not ADA compliant. And
Oh, very definitely not.
it's very definitely not. You need to walk up a full flight of stairs to get to what they call the first story, right? So possibly they could put a wheelchair elevator on the outside of the building, but for any of the units that are at the far side, not near the garages, uphill, or any of the units that are on the top, there doesn't seem to be practical to make them ADA compliant. But worse is this sentence, and this is on the bottom of page 9. The interior of certain units will be made ADA compliant. The interior of certain units will be made ADA compliant. Now, how do they decide which units are going to be ADA compliant? Are they the low-income unit ones? Right? And why aren't all units ADA compliant, at least on the interior? And it's also notable to me, it says here, if a buyer needs ADA access from the garage, accommodates for that will be pursued wherever possible, right? So, there's no access to these units. So you could have an ADA compliant on the interior, and apparently the residents had to be satisfied sitting in their apartment with no access to the exterior. So I'm hoping that the selectmen will query whether it makes sense for the Massachusetts Department of Housing Development, that's DHCD, and I think that's the department that actually reviews
Yes,
these rights.
yeah.
And I'm hoping whether it makes sense to issue a comprehensive permit to subsidy funding to a project that isn't ADA compliant. I have a question about the height and the design approach. You've mentioned how they keep saying 2.5 stories. This matches the design character of our design. Well, it's not 2.5 stories. There's a garage, there's a first floor, which is up a flight of stairs, right? Then there's the second floor, and then there's the gables. And these are massed together. These are rather large buildings. These are apartment houses, plain and simple. They aren't buildings, and many different statements in the application talk about how they look just like the houses on Dana Street, and that's bizarre. It's not true, right? They also talk about staggering the layout from Dana Street, and I looked at that more closely, and I find no, there are at least 2 buildings where there will be condos that I believe will look straight into the windows of the people who live on Dana Street. So I'm wondering, as you know, I'm an engineer, I'm not a designer, but I wonder if perhaps the selectmen could request a design review committee to read this application carefully and point out, which statements they think are misleading, and then they could convey that to the DHCD. Next is grade. You started this by saying that there's a steep grade. I'm glad you said that because the application does not. It calls it a gentle slope. Right, so this characterization is clearly false. It's also repeated by their own plans. Sheet C3 grading shows that the majority has a 10% slope, which is extremely steep. There is a portion of it that's about 7.5% slope. Another portion is about 9% slope. All of that's very, very steep. So this is a very, very steep slope. The application also only mentions east to west slope, that slope from border to Highland. See the question? So that's from border to Highland. But the property is also sloped from Dana to the Sawmill Brook. So there's 2 slopes that we're talking about. And in order to raise the property so that there's a flat enough surface to drop to make the access road, He's got to put a lot of fill up into the Sawmill Brook watershed. It's unlikely he'd be able to do that if the Sawmill Brook was properly part of our FEMA flood study, but like several other streams on the north side, one which goes through the other 40B project in Holton Street, there are several streams on the north side that are not properly part of our FEMA flood study, and consequently builders can come and put fill all over the place. So that's unfortunate. But even so, there is an issue with grading. That we're talking about a significant amount of grading, and I wondered if that much grading might even make a retaining wall next to the 22 Highland Street property. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at this very carefully, but it's possible because it's that much grading, a lot of grading. So far from a mild slope, this is a hill. It's clearly a hill. There's a lot of grading required, and I hope the selectmen will make that clear. Clarify that fact for the DHCD. Walkability, okay. The application absolutely depends upon its repeated assertion that the site is easy to walk to within easy walking distance to everything the resident might want, whether or not it be food or retail or travel, transportation, everything the person might want is within easy walkability. One might wonder why they are providing all those parking spaces if it's so easy to walk. But the proponent's own attachment F shows that, with few exceptions like Morocco School, all of the entities that are interested in town hall, fire stations, library, etc., all of them are outside of a mile away from the property, all of them. Now, is that close enough to call it walkable? What I did is I looked at other state agencies, one being the MBTA, our authority for commuting, right? Now, if you go to the MBTA and there's on their trip planner, the highest amount of walking that you can get is 1 mile. Here, there's certain that you can go at 1.5 miles down to the train station, so 50% more is what they're calling walkable. You can also look to the DHCP, the application itself. The application itself has a back box on page 32, has the following. For rural areas located in close proximity, i.e. approximately 1 mile. So they're saying their own standard, they're actually going 50% up above the standard that's set by the application and set by the MBTA when they talk about walkability. Now, that's not even taking into consideration the grade that goes from North Border to Highland and again from Highland to Washington. And I really thought that giving this presentation, that the applicants would be here giving this application. And I was going to challenge them to go to North Border and Highland, go to that intersection, walk to Stop and Shop, get a gallon of milk and a 6-pack of Coke and a couple of apples, and see if you can walk back to Dayton and Northern. And a second challenge would be to get a 6-year-old and see if you can walk from the same location to Morocco. I don't think you can. These aren't walkable because of the grade and not just the distance. So I really ask that the selectmen clarify in their response that these are not walkable entities. You can't walk from anywhere from this spot to any place downtown. You can't shop, you can't go to transportation. It's not walkable. That is really important. That's my next point, assessment. If you set aside that rather difficult assertion, that rather ridiculous assertion that this site is somehow walkable, then the application dies. Because in order to qualify for a comprehensive permit, according to the guidelines for a 40B comprehensive permit, and I will be giving you something like this, you gotta edit it, right? But I'll be giving this. It says that the Commonwealth has established 10 sustainable development principles. Each comprehensive permit project application that shall be evaluated for consistencies with these principles. If DHCD determines that the proposed project does not adequately address sustainable principles, the developer and community will be notified, and they may submit necessary revisions or withdraw the application. So if they are unable to come up to prove that they are a sustainable development, that they follow these sustainable development principles, they die. Now, page 20 to 38 of the application comprises checklists, which they go through and they prove that they're following sustainable development principles. Almost all of them rely on walkability. Almost all of them. So once you remove the ones that rely on walkability, you're left with a barren list with almost nothing in it. Add to that the following errors. One on, they checked that it is compact and clustered so as to preserve undeveloped land. They're not preserving any undeveloped land whatsoever here. They are developing every single little inch of that undeveloped land now. So I would say that that doesn't make sense to be checked. They're not preserving any undeveloped land. There's another one that's checked. It says for rural areas, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's not a rural area. This is a suburban area. That should not be checked, right? And then finally, this is a bad one. In the explanation for subsection, this is in the section 5, it's called expand housing opportunities. The applicant explains that Winchester is predominantly white, and then writes, it is envisioned that this project's affordable units could help the town improve its ethnic diversity. So I find this offensive, because apparently the applicant is equating low income with being non-white. And I would hope that the selectmen would tell the applicant that perhaps they need to change their paradigm, and that the selectmen will point out that the town does not agree with this paradigm nor this statement. But anyway, once you remove those 3 checkpoints along with the walkability, you're left with maybe 2 checks on. I mean, you basically are going to fail. It's nothing. There's nothing left. One of the sections as well is required, and they didn't check anything on their own. So they may be failing already, even without this walkability removal. What I would like the selectmen to do is maybe conduct an exercise amongst yourselves. Go over the sustainability checklist. It's only a few pages. Try to check these on your own, as if you were doing it together, and submit your version of the checklist to the Housing Authority. Because I strongly suspect that, your version is not going to be consistent with theirs, and that your version is going to show that it's not sustainable. It doesn't follow the sustainable principles, and therefore should be funded. This DCR permit is an issue. We already know how the applicant tried to tell the town that they had a road permit, and tried to, on the other hand, tell DCR that they were only getting it for one house. The applicant did include the planning board's denial of this definitive subdivision as part of the application. And that denial explains the board was not aware of the permit or the applicant's continued communication with DCR until after the town planner investigated the project further with DCR's special counsel, Tom Rosa. But I don't think that language adequately exposes the magnitude of the applicant's misrepresentation here of his interactions with DCR, and I don't think that it adequately expresses the frustration that the people around me have had with this applicant because of this misrepresentation, nor does it explain the frustration of the various boards, like our members of the planning board that we have here, for yanking us around and spending hours in review that was unnecessary. And I am hoping that the selectmen could convey this frustration to the DHCD. Finally, this brings us to an issue of character. Page 22 of the application investigates the character of the project principals in a series of yes/no questions. And the very first question is there pending litigation with respect to any of the applicant entities? All right, get out your pen. The applicant checked no, but sure enough, Middlesex Superior Court, docket number 1481, Charlie Victor 06846, shows that Craig Miller and 5 Points Development, both are principals in this comprehensive permit application, are defendants in active litigation. The next scheduled activity is a final pretrial conference in September of 2017. I will say that notably, as part of this litigation, Mr. Miller was the only person to submit arguments against the plaintiff's motion for a real estate attachment. Mr. Miller's arguments were not successful, and the latest order in the case is findings in order of the court. After notice of the hearing, the court finds that there is a reasonable likelihood that the plaintiff will recover judgment, including interest and costs and amounting to a greater than amount of the attachment proved herein. Basically, they attached real estate to the tune of $256,000. The very next question on page 22 is about real estate attachments. Are there any outstanding lands or judgments against properties owned by any applicant's entries? The applicant answered no. I will point out that Craig Miller is a third-party defendant, which means that basically Sotheby's sued Stolen Bank, and Stolen Bank said, hey man, we're not the responsible party, it's Craig Miller, right? So the attachment may be on land that's owned by Stolen Bank, but the responsible party is Craig Miller. And so in answering the second question, legally maybe he didn't have to answer no, but it's exactly the type of litigation that that Mass Housing is looking to find out, right? So I'm hoping that we bring that to light. I'm hoping this Selectmen will bring that to light. Now, the problem here, a big problem, is that this 40B application, you know, it contains misrepresentations, and we pointed out some of them, but these certifications on page 22 must be made under pain of perjury. And they say the words pain and penalties of perjury, and they are emphasized. I hereby certify on behalf of applicant, emphasis, under pains and penalty of perjury, that the information provided above for each of the applicant entities is, to the best of my knowledge, true and complete. How did he not know that he was a party to active litigation when he wrote, when he actively wrote against the motion to attach? So this failure to close this court case isn't just misrepresentation, it's perjury. So I'm going to ask the Selectmen to advise DHCD of the situation, present the facts of the matter, and ask them to investigate whether Mr. Miller has perjured himself. And if he has, please ask him to prosecute the full extent of law.
And thank you for your usual and thorough investigation. You're going to give us a copy of your stuff?
I have to edit it.
Yeah, let me, Jim, just, I may,
Ryan, so we can send it like that, correct?
yeah, you should, I would encourage, we can, when we submit our comments to the Mass Housing, put in as attachments any letters
Yeah.
or memos that are submitted to us, so I would strongly recommend that, you know, we'll try to capture everything and put it down, but to idiot-proof it on our part, would you please, you know, write, it doesn't have to be long letters, but short letters, maps, notations, anything you want. Everything that can be attached, and we'll put them in the formal record to do that. And it has an impact with Mass Housing to get very specific details on this sort of thing. So I'm sure, Ann, you've written that all down, right?
What?
Your comments, you got them all typed up, so,
I certainly do,
yeah.
but they have to be edited.
Right, so don't forget to do that, yeah. Send them in.
Can I submit this to you guys? This is a picture of what North Water Road looks like in this one.
Yep.
Yes, please.
Put it on a letter and send it.
Put it on a
to us.
letter and send it in, please.
And,
Yeah, can I give it to you now?
We prefer you attach it to a letter and give it to us formally.
yeah, because it's just a picture, and they'll say, well, where did this come from?
Yeah.
If you write it on a letter and say, I took the picture, it's North Water Road, I'm gonna butter, it'll have a little more credibility than he takes better photos than we do, but,
And to your comment, we did invite Mr. Miller to come and make a presentation tonight, and he declined, so. Yes, ma'am.
I ended up on a lot of the things. There are two things that I can think of that I saw that struck me as being incorrect on the application. And one was it asked if there were any right-of-ways or easements. And I would consider the DCR access to fall into that. They said there were no right-of-ways or easements in the property.
Mhm.
And the other one is, are there any flood hazards in the property? They said no. And that, I've seen the river go through there, so that should be brought up, that there really is a flooding hazard. It's not on a map, but it happens.
Well, are you sure that it went through that particular parcel? Be-
Oh, yeah, right there, yeah. all
I mean, we have movies that some people have provided us.
Yeah, that flooding does not go through his property.
Oh, I thought it went across.
It goes to the bottom. It
No,
goes to
it
the bottom.
goes underground. It goes underground.
Yeah.
No, but when it flooded
When
a
it
few
flooded.
years ago, it
I-
went over that property,
Oh,
down
no, I
there,
think
and on
probably
the.
right across, it would cross the bottom of the property. It would, yeah, flooding.
Yeah.
Here's his property, and here's the brook. And you can see it enters a culvert right there. Of course, the culvert plugged, and that's the reason we had a lot of the flooding. But you can see that the topography is uphill from there. So the likelihood that his site is flooding is, I would challenge.
It also comes down from my driveway. I get a lot of water flowing all the way down, and I have footage of that as well.
Okay, that would be useful to put into your letter to us? Okay?
Yeah. I was
Yes, sir.
gonna say, when that came across, and when that blocked out, the water came across where the townhouse is,
Yeah.
followed across that little corner near Highland Avenue, and over to the house on the corner, which belongs to the Goodwins, that's on the corner of Highland and Dane. It flooded right across and, tore everything up. I had a question, since this is the state of Massachusetts that's making these determinations for the 40B, and the DCR is also a state organization. Can the state of Massachusetts mandate that the DCR basically goes against their ruling, so to speak, and having cuts in there, but can they mandate that they gotta open that up, that road up there, to go into North Border Road?
The legislation does not provide for the state to override state regulations, only to override local legislation. It was, if this legislation was passed, it's called the anti-snob zone legislation, when it was passed, it was intended to prevent the towns from putting in zoning that would eliminate affordable housing. And so that was, but no, it only applies to overriding local zoning. I'm sorry, in the back there, yes, sir.
The Earthen Dam not far from there, it has to blast. That dam must be over 100 years old. That's going to put everybody below that dam in danger. He doesn't know if there's ledge in there or not. And it's all, that whole hill is ledge.
Yeah, there is ledge.
It's
Oh,
all over the place. So that's the real thing. That dam, it couldn't take a firecracker to blow that whole thing out. Let alone behind it.
Okay, very good point. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I live on Highland Terrace, and a number of years I've been here quite a while, and I've experienced from the time of childhood the water flow on Highland Avenue and from the dam, and I played on that creek for many days, and I've seen many a storm. I've seen the improvements, and some of them worked very well. They were redone, and I'm also worried about the people who are further downstream near the Abajone. And I'm very concerned about them. Because the aqueduct, if it's kept clean, is adequate to what level? They said 100-year storm. Well, we had a 50 and it overflowed, okay? And it did a lot of damage to this poor fellow on Dana Avenue. Feel for him, why do I care? I'm a little over the hill, I'm not sure I got a lot of it, But I mean, you have to have a certain feeling for the other people in this town. This town was built by a lot of good, solid people who had integrity. And it's up to every citizen in this town to respect that and do what he can to live there. I'm moving out in December. I could care, right? I do care. My forefathers were here, and they were the fabric of this community. And it's very important that Winchester maintains their reputation and their standard, because it doesn't matter if you have good schools, all right? It matters whether you have a decent environment, which we have preserved here for years, all right? That's why people want to live here. That's why my girlfriend, who lives in Wellesley, wants to live in Wellesley. It's not the money. She's a poor kid too. But she preserves that because her family was a rock in Wellesley at the time, right? And it means something. It's just not a comfortable place like in the 60s when all these people moved in and said, I want this, 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 and this. And then they left and left a bag of crap behind, all right? I know when I moved to this town in 1952, myself, that you could eat off the street, eat off it. There wasn't a piece of paper anywhere. The town, the people who lived in this town had respect for each other and respect for where they were and the decency here. And that's what gives Winchester the name. If you think it's the money, you're a fool. It's because of the town and what they represent. And if you allow a flim-flam developer to come in here after he's lied so many times already, all right? And you've seen him 100 times, oh, he's gonna do that, I'll do that later, whatever. That's crap. The guy's no good. He isn't. He's no good. I don't care who he is, never met him. But he's no good. I've heard everything I've heard here now, he's no good. And he doesn't represent this town. Now, I don't know if he lives in town or where he's from.
He does.
He does. Well,
Kid in school.
get the wagon.
I'll give you his address. We're driving there.
But it's true. You know, that you look around here, and there are certain things that are starting to dissolve because of these inputs of other things that are going on, that we allow the inch by inch by inch. And pretty soon you won't have a town. Not a town you can respect. And I think it's really important for everybody here. You're paying a terrific dollar to live here. You better get something for your money. You know? Really. And I always felt that I could always come to Winchester from any other place that I had been, and I had come to a respectable, decent place. It's not like my friend who grew up in Winchester, who lives in Chelsea, he's got bullet holes in his windows. You know? He can't go outside at night. He can't go out. He's a veteran, all right? He's very dangerous. He's insane. Doesn't go on the sidewalk at night. Do we want that kind of thing here? No, we don't. And some of the things that are going on here, whether the state wants to make stuff down our throat, will exist in a small way. We can look down near the dump at the projects down there. How many police cars? How many times have we had disruption? And those people went to other places in the town and they caused problems, all right? Now, we may have to accept some of those people. But if we can do it on a limited basis and get this guy down to the smallest units that he can, if we have to, make him toe the mark to put in decent roads and decent drainage that's not going to affect other people, all right? I was on Conservation Committee in Reading when I lived in Reading for a while, all right? And I saw the atrocities of what contractors can do. When the town wants money for taxes, they'll allow other people's property to be destroyed so they can see that dollar. I sure hope this town is not like that. Really.
Ann?
I just realized that there's a section of the application that contains financials, and I didn't look at it. So I suspect that it's got a lot of errors in it. Is there somebody who's good at that, an accountant who can, or with?
Well, that, we should have gotten a pro forma with the application because it's required, as you point out, and it was not present in our book. So we will
Well,
be,
online,
we'll be.
it's there, yeah, online, they have the whole financials.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there online, but.
Yeah.
I made just a quick question about the state law. I was told, and this may be wrong, because I don't know the state law, 40B, I was told that the state, it's either in writing or they frown on 40B being used. The purpose of it, like you said, the anti-snog, is to help get, I'm for 40B, get affordable housing. But they're against developers using it as a threat or a ram to then put non-40B. I was told that's true, the state, so, I mean, we've had meetings with Brian President, I don't know if this wasn't official, but where the developers made it very clear, he doesn't want to put 40B in. He doesn't want to be the builder, and you probably know this, he said, I don't want to be the builder in Winchester who puts 40B in this town and get a bad name. I really want to put 4 houses. And he came to the neighbors, he stopped in at Mike's, and then he had a meeting with all the neighbors, with Brian President, saying, he showed us the plan for 4 houses. He said, I want you to come to the planning board and support me getting waivers. But if you don't do this, I've invested a lot of money, I need my money back. I'm going to apply for 40B. And he said to us, who's honest for once, he said, I'm going to go for 40B at the same time. And I get it, he has to, he couldn't take the risk. So we went in front of the planning board and had a meeting, there's notes of that. And the planning board, I missed that meeting, but I guess one of the new members basically said, well, if we do this, we're just setting a precedent. Why don't you go and you'll come to us when you have your 40B approved and we'll talk. And I'm not saying the planning board would agree to give him the waivers of he wanted to put a cul-de-sac in, which has been banned, but with waivers you can do it. I just was told by someone who had some legal background, they thought the state really frowned on their nice 40B law, which was not put in place to help developers get rich by threatening bad 40B to get 5,000 square foot houses built. Can that be conveyed to the state? I mean, we have some records that we've had official meetings with the planning board that he was very honest, said, I don't want to put 40B in. I want to put these 4 houses, but I'm going to get the 40B approved, come back to the neighbors and say, haha, you're going to get 40B in your backyard, why don't you come fight for me to get some waivers to get, and to be honest, some of the neighbors, not because we're anti-40B, but because we're anti-density,
Right.
we're saying we'd rather have, we actually asked them for 3 houses, so they couldn't swing it financially. But we'd rather have 4 houses that are decent sized than 4 massive condos. I mean, if he came back and said, I'll put 2 40B condos, then that might be better. So I just didn't know if does the state frown on the fact that this guy really isn't pro 40B. He's really just using it as a threat.
My understanding is the same, that if they use it as a lever to get, but.
It's zoned for one home, it's zoned for
I think that, I think that we can check with town council very carefully on this,
Right.
But I think that the presumption is he went to the ZBA, went to the planning board, and he's now going to 40B. If he's filed the application, the presumption is that he's truly wants to file a 40B application.
Right.
And we can't, he's never written to us saying he doesn't want to, or that he's using it as a bargaining chip. However, we will make it very clear in our submission that there was a whole process that went on beforehand, so that, and he's acknowledged that in the attachment E. So we will make clear that there's been a process before and let the mass housing.
Again, we would urge you, if you feel that's, and that is an important point, that you send us a letter.
Planning board will get the comment.
Yeah.
Planning.
And the planning board will also be commenting on this proposal to us as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
His past or his history of building in this town, I know he has had some other issues with flooding and some bad projects. Will that be considered, taken into consideration? Some of his other projects that caused problems? Sunset?
That's the last.
Put this diplomatically,
Yeah.
we dealt with him very extensively on the Right Block Farm RFP proposals. I think we're well aware of his proposal methods and such like that. I don't think that can weigh in specifically on our comments.
Or planning and all that?
But somebody who, from the public, who put in letters that we have put in the attachment,
However, current litigation would certainly.
Current litigation would certainly bear on it, yes.
A role in the HCB's decision. Yeah.
Yes.
I just have two questions for you. One, my dad used to be a water and sewer commissioner, so I'm always obliged to ask this question. But I would be interested, has anybody studied what the impact of this, development, these projects will have on the water and sewer system? And if substantial requirements, adjustments need to be made, who pays for that? Do we, the taxpayer, or does the applicant?
Do we have capacity?
In other words, do we know what it is?
That is probably one of the more likely areas that we could get the developer to mitigate on Cambridge Street and the Cambridge Street 40B. There is a provision that the developer provide a certain sum of money to upgrade the water and sewer systems. So I think that is an area that, once we determine just how many units are, engineering will do a study. There's already a study going on over in that part of town to evaluate the capacity of the sewers and the water system. So that would fit right in.
I would urge us to do that,
Yeah.
based on what father's comments to me about this. And the second question I have, and probably you can't do anything about it, but it's my frustration with 40B, what I call the single lens. It only looks at housing, but it doesn't look at what I call the bigger picture, the impact of all of these projects. It's something that's critical to me, and that is transportation. And I think we all know 95, 93 is worse. I sat for an hour today on 95 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and tried to get to Peabody. Now, I know everybody says, well, we can't talk about other projects, but we all know that those 40Bs are being put on major transportation routes. It's killing us. And I think at some point we have to all start saying something about it. Maybe the state doesn't, or maybe the state only knows about single lens glasses, but they need to get a different set and look at the impact on the whole area. It's killing us.
The state legislature.
Well,
It's our reps, Michael Day, Jason Lewis. I mean, they're the ones we gotta get.
I've
We gotta
asked
get the
several
liberals.
meetings and haven't
We gotta get the
done
liberal
it.
Democrats to fight 40B. They love 40B, but it was a good law, had some good points, but
It was
it's
1969.
yeah, it's not being used the right way until the Democrats in the state, not Democratic, by the way, but until the Democrats, they control it, until they stop being so darn liberal and realize that 40B needs to be rewritten.
Wait a minute.
A couple comments on what we've learned over the years in dealing with these things. One is the law was set up because towns like Winchester said, schools, water, we can't bear it. And they basically said, if you were putting in single-family houses, the town would upgrade the schools and the water. And they said, so you can't use those excuses. Okay, so the courts basically have said, if it's a reasonable project and there's school or water or sewer problems, then basically it says, that's your problem. Now, the courts have in recent years, they've been expanding that. So in the case of the Cambridge, they put in traffic and put in some water too, so that's been expanded. The general attitude has been, and the law has been very clear, it's basically tough luck, okay? It's less an issue of Democrats and Republicans. It's more an issue of urban and suburban. What happened is the urban areas in the 60s and 70s said, we really don't want to bear all the housing costs, we'd be happy to share it with the suburbs. Suburbs said, no, thank you, but the number of urban legislatures plus the number of rural legislators who would be happy to get the housing always has been more than the number of suburban legislators. So and that's, I think, Peggy will remember, there was a push a couple years ago, I can't remember. Within the last 5 or 8 years, there was a push to change it.
That actually was last year, and it was just refiled.
Basically, has been there aren't enough suburban legislators to overcome the kind of reluctance of the urban guys to say, thank you very much, we'd like to have you share the problem with you. So it's a pretty onerous.
But here's my frustration, and I appreciate your comment.
We're frustrated.
But I'm saying, I'm pleading with all government bodies to start raising your heads up. I know our town manager talks with other communities. I think we all have to say, this is not 1969. I know the 95, 93 interchange was supposed to be more, that's been taken off the plate. So where's the state's responsibility? They're killing us, and I think we as citizens, we as taxpayers, have a right to say something, and I'm asking you as a selectman to help us raise that issue. It may not be able to, and maybe we won't be heard on this project, but it's, I think we have to look, I'm asking for a wider lens to look at this and look at 40B and what it's doing, not just the single lens of housing, but the bigger issues, as you say.
We have been, we're well aware of it, we've been talking with Jason and Michael.
Yeah, Heather, yeah.
And, you know,
Actions
as Betsy
as well.
said, there's been efforts to do it, but it needs to be a bigger effort.
Well, wait a minute.
Heather?
He is.
Let's let one person talk at a time. Heather?
Mike Day is coming to the planning board's meeting on July 25th to talk exactly about that, because he is proposing that they review 40B again. And so there is action being done, and the planning board's meeting with him July 25th at 7:30 in this room. And he's going to present what he's doing and how he's going about it, and what kind of help he needs, if we're interested in how he and his community go and try to drum up
And
support for it.
just to tie this right back to this conversation again, I just want to reiterate that remember that you're not supposed to get funding unless you follow sustainability principles, which means that your project has to be walkable, right? But so that would solve the transportation issue that you're complaining about. And the problem is that they're lying.
Right.
So let's call them for it, okay?
Okay, one last comment.
You mentioned, and this is, I mean, we're here to see what you guys can do to help. I'm not picking on this group of selectmen, I know it's been going on since the 60s, but my understanding is some towns, I think it's Wellesley, some towns that are at 8 or 9 or 7, they've been working. Michael Day spoke to the Rotary. If the town's showing that it's got a plan, it's working towards 10%, the town's given a lot more leeway
Right.
to not maybe block something like this, but to say, put in 12 units, not 24. Winchester, whose ever fault has been terrible. So a lot of this falls on the town of Winchester. We've been terrible. We're 2%. So the state, Michael Day said it in this wording, the state, if we go to the state looking for help on these 40Bs, the state's kind of like, screw you. You haven't, we gave you 20 years, 30 years to try and become affordable. You've given us, no. So now we're gonna stick it to you, and you're gonna get 40B. My question is, you guys are starting to do, I know Mike Betancourt told me, you guys are getting a plan together. You've got the Holton Street, which might go through, which will be a big one. And I know I've talked to some neighbors who are actually for it, not for the size, but because it's train tracks anyway. Is there any way that the state's going to realize that Winchester's actually being serious?
Yeah, so there's a process, there's a specific process that the law allows, which is to set up a housing production plan approved by the DHCD. And a couple of weeks ago, Mike and I are in the working group for the housing production plan. We also have a couple of people from the planning board and other stakeholders, and we're going to develop a plan that we're going to get approved by the DHCD. As soon as we start producing units to that plan, we gain what's called safe harbor. And what safe harbor gives us is the ability to say to Mass Housing, we are producing affordable housing. We are serious about addressing this issue. You're completely right. Having under 2%, we have no way to go to the state and say, hey, give us a break, right? So that's what we're going to do. And then once we gain safe harbor, then these developers can't come in and just say, hey, we want to build here, because we can say to Mass Housing, you can deny this because we're making our own progress, and here's our plan.
And it's not in accordance with our plan.
And that's what we're definitely working on. Unfortunately, we don't have that right now.
But I appreciate you doing that, and the whole selectmen. I mean, I want to point out, because I know there's a lot of push to the selectmen, and I don't want to blame. I just know for 30 years it hasn't been done, but it's nice that this group of selectmen should get some credit that they're going to get that plan done. It may not save us, but it'll hopefully save some other people.
Well, the other thing too is actually, as noted, we have rezoned the downtown, and it's really generally been done on 40R principles, in that it's transit-oriented design.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that, and we're also allowing, as you know, in the course of the zoning, we're also allowing greater height, which would actually allow for more housing in the downtown.
I was just going to say, thank you, Bruce. One of the tricky parts about the housing production plan is that you actually have to follow your plan and produce housing every year. So it would be more than 40 units, of affordable housing every year, and then we would be in that safe harbor. So that is what is additionally so offensive about this project, is that we are only getting credit for 6 units. It is as high density as possible. So there's no altruism here. I know the planning board has seen this process a lot more than we have with this developer. So, and I did want to say that we are going to be putting together a working group of staff, selectmen, members of the planning board, and members of the community and the neighborhood. So think about who in the neighborhood would be a great person to sit on that working group with us. If there are, I know everybody's been working on this for a few years, and you know your neighborhood better than we do. And I know a lot of you have done a lot of homework that would be helpful. And the more that we work together, I think our advocacy would be is a lot more efficient. And as we've seen in the Forest Ridge project as well, I think we have a better voice when we work together. And so we appreciate your input tonight, but also we're going to be reaching out to you to help us in the coming weeks, because there's such a short turnaround on this.
Dave, did you have any final comments? Right, Marianne? Well, yes, sir.
One quick question, sorry if you already mentioned it, but is North Quarter Road a state road, or is that a?
It's DCR-owned road.
How does that influence the?
They continue.
Well, again, any curb cut or tie-in of a road to that road requires their permission. And, you know, I think previously the applicant claimed to have that permission but really what he had was for a single driveway to a single family home.
DCR considers that road to be roads internal to the fellows, to their
Right.
plan. And so they have a set of, and they're generally not enthusiastic.
Yes, I was going to say
about
that.
expanding access onto their internal parkways.
Just, John.
I'm on the Housing Partnership Board. I want to just make a couple of comments. In response to your question and clarifying the whole housing production plan issue, Mass Housing has a very good read on what Winchester is doing positively and negatively. And they will give us credit, soft credit, for making progress, even independent of a housing production plan. And I've dealt with them on numerous issues where our good deeds are rewarded and acknowledged and recognized. So they're not quite as cold and distant as you may think they are on that. The second issue I want to raise, and I will follow up with you later, and I think this is a potentially serious issue. A number of people have commented on the errors and inconsistencies in the current application. And I think that's a serious problem. The application, even above that, is very difficult to read because it's 300 pages long. I think the Board of Selectmen should give consideration, or should ask Mass Housing to ask the applicant to either withdraw the application or to put it on hold. I think the errors in the application are so serious that I think it cannot be evaluated in its current form.
Okay, thank you. Just to let everybody know, the presentation that you saw tonight and the drawings and so forth will all be put up on our website if they haven't already. So it should be up tomorrow at the latest. And with that, yeah.
If they submit letters, should they address them to the?
Yes, please address them to the town manager here at Town Hall. And you can hand deliver them or mail them, whichever is more convenient.
If you have anything electronically, like pictures or anything like that, we can send
You can submit a PDF of the letter, and then the attachments will be fine.
Again, to the town manager.
Winchester.us.
I'm sorry.
As simple as that, town manager.
At Winchester.us.
It's on the website.
Okay.
Would they have to be in the letters?
Well, it's expected that the board's letter will be submitted to Mass Housing during the week of August 7th. As you heard Jim say earlier, they'll probably take up the final version of the letter in one of those July meetings. So it would be good
if you're gonna submit a letter, that you get it to us sometime mid-July, latest. That would be helpful.
We will likely be meeting the week of the 7th as well, so, of August, prior to submitting the letter. But, one last comment.
Yes, could I ask one more question? The land where the house is that the town owns, that was going to be developed at one time, is there a tie-in between this contractor and that development project?
At this time, no.
I didn't know if that was leverage to bring that into this whole thing.
That is a possibility. It's obvious, Dave and town manager and I were in that house today. It's in really bad shape. Plaster falling from the ceiling, mold on all the woodwork. It's in really sad shape. I'd be happy to share pictures. But I don't think you really want to see them. So yes, I mean, it is a possibility. There's also, as we get into our production plan, the other pieces of town-owned land that were shown there are possible sites for some affordable housing. And mass housing is, in fact, encouraging towns to look at smaller, building fewer units, maybe 5 or 6 in different places and spreading them around, which we're hopeful that they will encourage and subsidize.
One question that goes along with that is, what is the status of that project that was started, I believe, about 3 years ago, 4 years ago? Where that house was supposed to be.
That got killed.
That got killed?
Yeah, the guy who was leading it got arrested. He was working 2 jobs, one for the state and working a second job. Yeah, remember?
Yeah, the housing,
the housing guy.
housing authority guy who was double dipping.
He was double dipping. He was the one who came and told us to basically shut up and he'll do whatever he wants. Well, he got arrested, so we can all write letters to him now. He lives in Milton, by the way. I know his dad.
Oh, there's a supplemental?
The house on Highland Avenue.
$529 from the Selectmen.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, that's for the housing, the inspection. Would you get that over to Mike so he can make a motion?
So we go by.
Thank you everyone for coming. To pay for the inspection. The moment. We got.
Yeah, that's what Texas Chainsaw Massacre stuff.
It was, let's just say that we were, just before we got there, they were sweeping up some glass, so that, here, well, he was waiting for things to calm down.
Yeah, it was just my friend Dave Rickson. My brother was an Eagle Scout, and I was in here. I didn't think that you now. Because I know your son, you've seen him like that. Yeah, we got school with. Yeah. I was thinking that, why did I know? But I really didn't think you were
how old you are.
Yeah, but that's what you look young, but I was thinking you were your son. No, it's amazing.
No.
You still involved in Scouts?
Haven't been for a number of years.
Okay, well, thank you for all you do with Boy Scouts. Wonderful.
that your son?
Hey,
That's pretty good.
I'll take that. I'll take that for one night anyway.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve a home inspection for the first-time home buyers unit at 57 Harvard Street. This is a pretty typical process for us to submit a payment for the inspection. This is for $529.
Second? So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, just one other quick point. I had a discussion with Stacy Ward over her contract is up, and basically I would like to throw on the table for your consideration, and we'll vote on it at our next meeting, that we grant her basically a $5,000 increase, actually 5% increase, which is takes her from 110 to 115.5.
So this is on for next time.
This will be on for next time. This is just to let you,
What's the term of that contract?
the term is a year at a time. Yeah. So we'll be discussing that at the next session. All right.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a bunch of stuff to sign.